Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Office of the State Controller's Quick Bids training series. These videos are designed to help state agencies record and verify various accounting requirements within RSTARS based on guidance from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. I will be walking you through the capital asset acquisition fact pattern for the example transactions we'll be posting into RSTARS. For our example capital asset, we purchased a piece of equipment with a useful life of 7 years in the amount of $450,000. Furthermore, there are additional parts necessary to capitalize in the amount of $94,000 and other ancillary costs of $47,000. This brings a total capitalizable asset cost of $591,000. In the next few videos, we will walk through the journal entries and how to enter them into RSTARS.
I will be entering 3 transactions to show the purchase of the capital asset into RSTARS. These could all be entered as one transaction, but I'm entering them separately to demonstrate that additional parts and ancillary costs are all included and entered the same as the original equipment purchase. I've already mapped out my entries with the document numbers, T-codes, and accounting elements that I will need to use. This information is shown to the right of the screen. Make sure first that you're logged into RSTARS under the correct user class to make the entry. I'm going to log in under user class 17. At this point, you will navigate to the 500 screen to make your entry. On the 500 screen, enter your agency. For this example, I will be using Agency 107. Enter a batch date, or you can allow it to default to today's date. I'm going to leave it blank and allow it to default. Enter a batch type, and we'll be using batch type 4, and then a batch number. Follow your agency's protocol on to how you number your batches, and then you can enter a batch count or a batch amount. You may also leave these blank. I will be using 3 as my batch count and $591,000 for my batch amount. The batch edit mode is set to 2, and I'm going to leave it there. You can also enter an effective date, but I'm going to leave it blank and allow it to default to today's date. Press F10 to save, and this will take you into the batch. On the 505 screen, my first entry will pay for our equipment costs within the governmental fund. Enter the effective date to determine which fiscal month the transaction should post. I will use today's date, and then I will use today's date as the due date. Enter the document number and the suffix. I will be using VP 102402, suffix 001. Then I will enter my transaction code of 222 and my PCA 81906. I will enter my agency object of 5150. And the total amount of $450,000. I will enter my document amount, which is the total amount for the whole entry, so $591,000. And then I'm just going to copy in my vendor number and my mail code. At this point, I'm going to press F4 to draw in any lookup fields and to make sure that I have no errors. My lookup fields have been brought in and I don't see any errors, so I will press F10 to save the transaction. My transaction was successfully written. I will move on to suffix number 2. Again, if I needed to change the PCA or the agency object, I could do that at this time. I'm going to put the amount in since those are the same for $94,000. Again, I can press F4 to bring in any lookup fields and then F10 to save my transaction. And now I'm on to my third suffix. So I will put $47,000 in for the ancillary costs. My agency object and PCA are the same. So again, I'll press F4, bring in the lookup fields and see that I have no errors. So I will press F10 to save my transaction. This completed my entry. I pressed F7 to go to the 520 screen and see my 3 lines of entry. I can now press F6 to confirm that my batch is balanced. This batch is now ready for review and for release. I will now move on to my second batch to recognize the capital asset within the government-wide reporting fund. For this entry, I'm making a JV document entry and will be using user class 27 to capitalize the asset. I will need to switch user classes to make the entry. So we'll do that right now. I will be using user class 27 to make this entry. And I will navigate back to the 500 screen. On the 500 screen, I'm going to enter my agency number. I will be using agency 107. And then I can enter a batch date or leave the field blank. I'm leaving the field blank, so it'll default to the current date. I'm going to enter a batch type, and it will be 4 for this example. And then follow your agency's procedures to assign a batch number. I will be using batch number 103. You may enter the expected batch count and the batch amount, or you can leave these fields blank. I will enter 1 and $591,000. I'm going to leave it as a batch edit mode of 2, and then you can enter an effective date, or you can allow it to default to today's date. I'm going to allow it to default. At this point, I'm going to press F10 to save my header and enter into the batch. I will be using a JV entry to capitalize the asset and record it within the government-wide reporting fund. Enter the effective date to determine which fiscal month the transaction should post in. I'm going to leave mine as it is, 10/31/24. Then I will enter the document number and the suffix. So it is JV 10/24/02, suffix 001. And then I'm going to enter my reference document, which is the VP I entered earlier, 10/24/02/001. Enter the transaction code, and mine is 545, and then enter the PCA and the agency object sub, so 99905, and then 5150. I will enter my amount, which is the $591,000, and my document amount, which is the same, $591,000 for this entry. For this entry, I need to enter an OpenGL, which is 0815 to record this as equipment and machinery. Now I'm going to press F4 to bring in any lookup fields and see if there are any errors. I do not see any errors, so at this time I'm going to press F10 to save my transaction. The transaction was successfully written. I will press F7 at this point to go to the 520 screen to see my entry. And then I'm going to press F6 to confirm that my batch is balanced. The batch is balanced and is ready for review and release. This concludes my entry for the capital asset acquisition.
We have generated the DAFR 6610 and 6620 reports to verify the information was recorded properly. The examples used in these videos were created within the acceptance region. Since OBI does not include the acceptance region, we ordered the DAFR 6610 and 6620 reports. But under normal circumstances, the DAFR 6610 and 6620 reports within the OBI repository will show the same information. These reports are used by your SARS analyst in conjunction with agency disclosures to evaluate if balances and activities are recorded correctly for proper reporting in the ACFR. Therefore, it's important to review either these DAFR reports or OBI queries regularly and during the year-end closing process. Scrolling through the reports briefly, we can verify the information. In the previous portion of our training, we walked you through recording $591,000 to record a capital asset within our stars at acquisition. We see it here on the DAFR 6610 for the government-wide reporting fund, in agency object 5150, which also rolls up to comptroller object 5150, representing equipment and machinery. This is appropriate. Turning to the DAFR 6620, we also see it in the government-wide reporting fund, in GL account 0815 for equipment and machinery, GL account 3018 for net investment in capital assets, and GL 3074, change in capital assets. In the governmental fund, we see the initial vouchers payable and expenditure control transactions in GLs 1211 and 3501, respectively. These transactions will stay here until the batch is released. Once the batch is released, as seen here, we see the system-generated transactions in Step 2 have been recorded to bring the net effect of these transactions in Step 1 to 0. Step 2 also expends cash as indicated by GLs 0070, cash on deposit with treasurer, and GL 3500, expenditure control cash. These are appropriate. These transactions have been recorded correctly.